Hello, everyone. It's very nice to see some familiar names at this point, some familiar black screens. But we're so grateful to have this opportunity to share the exhibition with you. So to give you all a little rundown of how things will go tonight, we'll run through the exhibition on a shared screen within the Zoom window. And then I will put forth timestamps in the chat for our video works, just so we can get a little bit of a taste of what we're talking about if you haven't familiarized yourself with the exhibition already. We'll walk through our own process in the conception of the exhibition, to building, to speaking a little bit about the artist's work. And then we'll close off our tour and invite some discussion from the room around questions that we put forward through the registration form. And of course, we'll just refresh everyone on them before we get into them. So again, thank you so much for joining. And I guess this is the point where I'll share my screen. And it looks like we're here. Sean, can you see everything I'm doing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, it's so clear.
Amazing. Amazing. So I think it's important that we maybe start out on why this community guidelines page exists. Because I do think that the conversation of safety and placemaking plays a large role in this exhibition. So when we were creating together, we chose, at the conception of the exhibition, we knew that we wanted some form of chat to connect viewers to each other, especially, you know, thinking about where the exhibition originated from and the desire to kind of take up that nostalgic space of social media networks pre-big Google acquisition. And the conversation of the chat room was always kind of floating above us. And then we got Keiko's work, Keikobot, that also encourages participation from the audience. And we brought these community guidelines into fruition because there is a certain amount of trust that's needed when you're using these spaces and activating these spaces. So this is in place just to remind people of the tenets that we stand on as curators, the tenets that you should have when interacting with an artist's work, and also the tenets of safety and comporting yourself in a digital space.
We wanted to, really foster kind of like, a live journal type MySpace space without the vitriol that can happen in those spaces as a veteran of those programs as a teenager. And, being online, that's a whole different step because anyone can join your exhibition as long as going to a place where, harm reduction can happen. And so a lot of the exhibition design really was focused on safety, and not to say safe space, there is no safe space, but how do you make a space safe enough in your own control? So the guidelines was a great way to really like lay down kind of the law and just keep it in the way that we would not accept it. Kind of like I just said it was like a Club Penguin method, where in Club Penguin, if you type in a swear word, I go, you said an word, you are banned, kind of thing. And not that extreme, but we wanted to have that type of care, Club Penguin care, I guess.
Yeah,
so
that's a good way to put it.
And in our own way for queer people and trans people.
All right, so without further ado, let's enter the queer sphere. So I'd like to talk a little bit about our web developers' work, because without them, this exhibition really wouldn't have come to fruition in the way that it has. And that's Shani's contributions from Mouth of Tiger now that they're operating from. The rotating logo that you see in the background is taken from a queer print house called Gender Fail. I feel like it's very familiar to some artists in the community. And this specific font is taken from ACT UP protest posters. So each letter has actually been sourced from a real poster of protest in the queer community. Sean was fantastic in our exhibition building process. They brought their mind as an artist into the space, which I think Sean and I were both extremely grateful for, because this is our first time really operating from a digital realm in an exhibition building, and we cannot give them enough accolades for their contributions here.
It was such a match made. It was such a great match. Like, we came into this even before we started this, like, I don't know how we're gonna do like an online type of aesthetic show, and we basically gave them an idea of what we wanted, and we gave like a couple of templates. One was like Kim Kardashian's MySpace, and a live journal from like 2006, and then they just created this wonderland, and we're like, you like read our minds like completely, entirely, and it was such an amazing experience of communication that I've never experienced before in curatorial practice, and it was just such an amazing moment where you're like, this is gonna work. This is really gonna work aesthetically on our behalf.
Yeah, I definitely feel like that was the first moment of a kind of avalanche of exhibition building where both Sean and I were like, oh my gosh, this is really happening. And I feel like it was, again, like an instance of community at work and an instance of collaboration happening that, we've seen cross-platform with this show. Talking a little bit more about the exhibition builds, there are a few elements of the website that I think we maybe need to point out just because they're so good. The cursor here with the glitter emoji, we actually, in conversation about building the website, we were looking at other inspirations, and we realized that our first artist, Lucas LaRochelle, also had this exact blinky cursor in a different format on their website. And we're like, wow, like what a lovely instance of something further than coincidence. But yeah, the connections are really beginning to form with this. So I'll maybe navigate. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to do a quick land acknowledgement, like look through, just to show them what kind of the kind of bigger topics that we had to really tackle in order. We'll just do a little quick run through, but since I'm working from Honolulu, Hawaii, like right now, I did a quarter of the show in Toronto. I realized we need to kind of acknowledge the lands that we're all working on in an online space. Let's see, and for that, we wanted to do Toronto, but we wanted to do Hawaii as well, and then realized the artists are also kind of across Canada, and so we acknowledge each land people we're standing on. Our artists are from Montreal, from Halifax, from Vancouver, so it was really an experience to like make sure that we are acknowledging all the lands that we are extorting from and working from, and also acknowledging that technology does have a colonial power to it. Dana, you had this really good phrase for it.
Yeah, so in our process of research for the exhibition, Lucas, one of our artists, actually pointed us towards the essay Making Kin with the Machine by Kite et al. And we were using the ideas that it was built upon, and kind of thinking about how we are inhabiting digital spaces. And I do think that it's important to mention that when you are inhabiting a space online, you are working from materials that have been sourced through capitalist colonialism from places that most of us can't name because we don't have a grasp of the technology. But it's also incredibly important to recognize Indigenous presence in these online spaces, and that these online spaces do carry legacies of capital colonialism in their manifestations and ideas of ownership. All right.
Yeah, just wanted to go through a quick run through before.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Oh, no problem. Now the works.
Yes. So let's just go through the list here. We'll start with QutieBot. I think what I will do is throw a timestamp up in the chat, and then I'll ask everyone to listen with their mute on. And we'll maybe sit for about 2 minutes and absorb what we can from it, and then come back to each other to chat about it. So I will start QutieBot from 106. I'm just going to throw that up in the chat for everyone to reference. And we'll come back here in, again, about 2 minutes from there.
We ended up kissing upstairs.
Sorry, water down the wrong tube. But if we can kind of, we were so excited when we received Lucas's work. And I think QutieBot is like the kind of place where we started thinking about specifically queer futurity. To speak a little bit about QutieBot's functioning and basis, this is an iteration and kind of like a move forward from Lucas LaRochelle's Queering the Map, which exists as a massive counter mapping strategy online. And I will throw the link in the chat as we move into the discussion, because I think it's something that everyone who's interested in this kind of digital placemaking should check out if they haven't yet. But QutieBot is a AI production from an AI from those data points in Queering the Map. So how this functions is that users submit a place, a data point coordinate on a map, and the experience of queerness or the queer story, or, you know, just a lovely little anecdote. And then they get all input into this kind of massive archive of queerness through land. And what QutieBot does is move forward from that and take those coordinates and the images from Google Maps from those coordinates and deep dream them into the images that you're seeing here in front of us. And then also it takes the text inputs from the users inputs them into an API2 generator, I believe. And then Lucas has extracted specific lines that this machine has, or this AI has actually constructed from the text it was given. So I think the reason we were so interested in this is centralizing land as an importance of queer futurity. But it's also about the kind of disorientation that happens in the work, and finding oneself not on one path or on a forking path, but a completely new imagined path between those two.
Yeah, and like we talked about it before, but placemaking in between memories of queerness, and you know, like your first kiss or the first time you came out, and you see kind of every image, but it's also dissociated because it's also a memory, and that's what's so visually poetic about the work, I think, and just like how the AI kind of makes that happen is just really magical, and each time I watch it, I'm kind of blown away by it, and yeah, no, it's just kind of making queer placemaking, which is interesting, kind of queer utopias, but like placemaking of realities, which is like something I really just, it kind of opened something within me for sure.
Yeah, I think too, like the idea of like place and affect, and we had a chat with Lucas previous to this, and they were saying that like the affect of being a moderator of these spaces really does take a toll, and CutieBot became kind of a way to distance themselves from that consistent barrage of information, and a lot of the times semi-traumatizing information. So it is creating like a new experience of these places that almost kind of and maybe exist. So moving forward, Wes's opening night playthrough. Again, I think I might just throw the link to this in the chat too, just in case we're navigating there. And the timestamp for this one is, hold on here, 07:56 for everyone watching from home. So again, we'll just watch a small snippet of this and then come back to speak about it together. All right, and if we can bring it back in here again. We were so excited to find Whess's work. Specifically thinking about, the parameters that we had set forward for the show of like utilizing that space of possibility in social networking technology and kind of like thinking through YouTube videos before the introduction of monetization, and honestly like censorship through that. But I think the humor and levity opening night playthrough brings to the show is incredible. This is all a performance of a game that, again, doesn't quite exist. These are all images Whess has made for the performance, and everything is scripted. But it does bring us back to these places that we're so sorely missing as queer folks, as, this queer scene is systemically shutting down because a lot of these places just can't afford to keep their doors open through bottle sales out the door. And it does feel like a nostalgia, but also a kind of safe interaction in this time.
Yeah, and just to note, the kind of place that Whess creates in this video game is an indigenous version of a Vancouver venue called Redbox, and in this game it is both an art venue and a music venue, and it's an indigenous punk venue, and a lot of the simulation of the game is going to an art opening and seeing your frenemies, seeing your crush, kind of the things that we thought we loved and loved at the same time of socialization. And it's kind of like it puts it all into perspective with COVID and everything. And one of the funny things is you can choose what you want to say. So do you want to say, like, say someone says something backhanded to you, do you want to give them sass back, or do you just want to make it through the night? And you have that option of just of being polite or being forward. And one of the objectives of the game is that if you have to pee and you pee your pants, you basically lose the game. So you have to wait like in a bathroom line, you have to flirt with your crush, you have to make small talk with your frenemy or art rival. It's just like a lot of fun, and it really does relate to kind of the luxuries of what we used to have. And compared to what's going to happen in the future, we really don't know. And the big anxious art opening, like, it's such a mystery now, but it brings you back into that space and kind of makes you kind of realize the fun and all the tribulations, and it's just something that we do as artists and curators.
Yeah, I think there's something that feels incredibly welcoming about the space Whess creates in the video game, or in, I guess, the performance. But there's also like these little ruptures of, theory introduced, or like the person of like, oh, like, it seems like the person who made this went to art school. Good, bad, maybe. And there's something, I think when Sean and I were building this exhibition, we were really interested in pop culture and mainstream media. And I think Whess does such an excellent melding of like art school theory and also like just existing in the world as a queer person that is so exciting.
I agree.
Okay. Keikobot.
Work number 3. This one not necessarily has to have a video played, so we can all keep talking while this goes on.
We can just chat as we scroll through here. So Keikobot actually was proposed as a different work and kind of morphed into the performance that we had on opening night and throughout the exhibition. And this is from artist Keiko Hart. And what they were thinking about in the introduction of, so basically Keikobot functions the same way that CleverBot does, in that it learns from, or the performer Keiko learns from the inputs of the audience and then starts to echo the same kind of syntax or the same kind of sentence structure or the same kind of relation to the people interacting with them through this chat. And they were really thinking about, you know, as our use of AI chat has increased, specifically with, you know, Siri and Alexa in our homes, who's left out of the conversation? What kind of vernaculars are left out of the conversation? And who is deciding what an ideal user brings to this interface? So they were really kind of thinking about playing towards a future where the ideals of progress from these, you know, male-dominated, racially exclusive companies are not the only thing that we're moving towards with AI chat. And they were specifically drawing from a queer interested audience to build this kind of AI experience.
And I feel like a lot of this is where a lot of the safety kind of work came into. It's just even the promise of this chat. We were very, you know, we got some feedback from a lot of people, and we also worked with the artist a lot and to like kind of formulate this. And it was a lot of effort was put into making sure that it was interesting and captivative, but also safe. And luckily, it's been such a fun, wonderful experience so far. And you know, the people who've come on have been very respectful, and it's very fun. And you know, I love getting blips on my phone whenever Keikobot's on a shift, and it's just like wow, Keikobot has fans, and this is like it really like I've never done like a bot type work or curated bot type work or like a internet performance, but it was really just like captivating to see how interested people are in chatting with Keikobot and kind of trying to get an answer that they want from this bot. And
yeah, that's true. I think people have asked very leading questions sometimes with the bot, and it's interesting because I feel like a lot of people interact with bots to kind of see them break. And there's been this very like a very tender approach to Keikobot where they want to see the intelligence grow, and there's been interest in the personal, and I think that's something that, you know, is really beautiful about the space around it.
Yeah, compare it to like the first AI bot available to the public. I think it was Sophie, I think, and that was like completely just a disaster of people trying to put their input as. It's just like how this can evolve and how with care it can go good, you know, like instead of making a spectacle, there's ways, and there's such easy ways from such a minimal level to make it safe.
I think too, like the building of an archive is really interesting with this, and it you know, Keiko is someone who works with these themes throughout the trajectory of their progress, and kind of having that archive of conversation or like epistemology, maybe like letter writing. It starts to delve into different conversations of anonymity on either end. But yeah, it's building, and it continues to build, and it's been really exciting to watch it grow over the course of the exhibition. All right. Staying in my pending doom. This is one, I think we'll just let this one play since it is only 2.5 minutes, and then come back to chat about it. I feel like I should have said this before CutieBot, but just for anyone watching, there is some disorienting camera panning. If that does bother you, just a heads up here.
And some color changes. So just so a warning.
All right, let's start her off. Sean, do you maybe want to start off with this one?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Marissa Sean Cruz playing In My Impending Doom. It is like a video collage, kind of drag performance that and cosplay that kind of involves the Boston Dynamics MIT police robot dog, aka Spot. And a lot of it is kind of mirroring this cuteness and this creature-like thing to that toy dog that you see in Sean Cruz's video, and how it relates to this horrifying technology of policing and surveillance, and it's becoming more prevalent. There's been so many memes actually in the last week of Spot on the streets, and how it's becoming more to the public. It's breaking into people's homes now. I feel like this video kind of, it predates like the public access to Spot the robot dog, but it really is kind of like this horrifying empathy for this creature. And there's like a comparison from the toy dog to the robot dog, and Marissa kind of uses this kind of Gen Z e-girl doom drag kind of to deal with like apocalyptic things like the robo dog. And that's why we really chose it for QUEERSPHERE, is the artist's use of drag and cosplay and how they apply it to their real life as an e-girl, and kind of the Gen Z culture of really like portraying doom in this hilarious but also sad way is something I find genius, and I really wanted to have that representation of how how that's working out with younger generations. And if you want to add anything, Dana?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think when we're talking about, I think this conversation or this exhibition has talked a lot about queer utopia, queer futurity. And then with the introduction of Marissa's work, we're starting to think about dystopia. We're starting to think about those same technologies that provide us this space being turned, against us in ways. And I think too, like your introduction of Gen Z and art making, I've kind of, over the past week, I've been thinking a lot about generational privilege, especially when it comes to being a queer person, and like the realities of this space that we're in right now is that it wouldn't have existed without the work of previous generations. And that work is anti-state. We're existing in a place that we're at because people have rioted. They've hit the streets. They've gone against police, harming them. And we're kind of resting in the position we are now because of that protest. And I think like this work brings that conversation into that realm, without specifically talking about it, but it still does feel like, this generational gap in relating to that struggle, but also an acknowledgement of it.
And seeing, from the last summer, and so the activism that Gen Z does on the streets now, it's kind of interesting seeing the rise up. And especially there's a lot of talk about how, Gen Z, especially those born after 9/11, never really saw the perfect world, quote unquote, from a neoliberal stance. And so they've always had this kind of idea that the world is just like this. And I also wanted to point out in this video the Frankenstein's monster type of quality to it. With Spot the dog, there's such an empathy for this dog because it's a horrifying monster, but it's also this thing created by man to improve society, and it's not at all, and it's really horrifying, and it's dystopic. And I feel like the Demi Lovato song played in this video is very much the narrative of Spot. Yeah. And it gets sadder and every time, and just like, and you like robo dogs, from the invention of like a dog toy to this, it's really just unnerving, and it's sad and like funny and just everything above. And like how we decided to make dog robots to gain state control. So that's just it goes in my mind a lot.
I think like to bring it back to making kin with the machine, which has now been like a work that I've been parsing through for months now, and it just keeps getting better each time. But they talk about, you know, the creation of AI without criticality, without decolonial thinking, and it becomes, and I quote, an extremely powerful being that will make the same mistake as their creators, but with greater consequences and even less public accountability. And I feel like Marissa is reintroducing this empathy, this criticality, this alternative mode of thinking that we've kind of now pulled into our operating system from these big corporations that are making these products.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on to Max's work. I'll let it load for everyone here. So when we were bringing this one in, we were really kind of thinking, again, pulling back to that original conception of queer folks being censored on the internet. And I think like where I began to even begin thinking that there was a place for me in the queer community was like early, oh gosh, like 2012 Tumblr. And that's where I discovered queer sexuality. And Max's work really does feel like a hearkening back to that time. I'll enter it here on the screen. And its gift form in the fact that you can navigate it on your own, in the fact that it plays with erotics rather than explicitness. But I think, you know, what stands out to me as the strong point in this, and the reason I kind of brought it in, is the fact that it showcases queer sexuality in the queer context. I feel like a lot of the time, like when you have a queer show, you're putting it in a museum, which is then, you know, removed from its context. And then it seems to skew toward the hypersexual, which again, removed from its context, can have incredibly harmful repercussions on the community. And I think what Max's work is doing here is kind of centering it in its own context again, which is incredibly exciting to me.
I agree. It's I love the sensuality of it, the agency of control of the body, and you know, it's just such lovely cinematography, and it's not what, you know, especially with both AFAB and trans porno, like nudity is usually sexualized by people who are not of those communities, and this is bringing back the agency from a trans and from trans perspective, which is like very radical in my opinion.
Yeah. And the bisexual lighting on this is fabulous, I have to
Absolutely.
say. Yeah.
It's great. Oh my god. Even the X, I was like, the layout of this all is just like, wow.
Yeah. So we're rounding up on quarter two here. I think we'll maybe, it seems like we've covered everything you want to cover. Sean, did you want to bring anything else into the discussion, the tour portion?
I would just say, like, from the kind of reading samples we brought through and the videos, a lot of this inspiration came from certain readings that me and Dana came together with, and especially YouTuber Cat Black, who I really brought this to Dana. I'm like, there's a video by Cat Black, who's a Black trans YouTuber from Los Angeles, California, and they talk about kink, transness, and they talked about how many times they've been demonetized, and they did this experiment where they had a video that said gay and trans, and it was demonetized immediately, and then she on screen just said straight in a video, and then it got monetized, and that really sparked the plug of like we can't find room in the public sphere, and our bars are shutting down. And you know, in art, we're kind of homogenized sometimes, or we're designated to a month, and it was really, we wanted to defy that, and hopefully that vision came through for us. We do believe that it did, and we can, but it's also not a solution. We want to go further with this in our own works, and we want to see more, and we hopefully are just adding something to the discourse. That's kind of where I want to go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like when we're talking about this placemaking, it's always understanding that, you know, we're standing on incredibly firm supports from the generations past, and that we're all moving towards this idea together. And we're not sure what it looks like yet, but, you know, we're going to continue to try.